asynchronously. Rachel does everything for us. She orders our books, she does our library guide, she helps me figure out how to teach certain things in my classes, like information literacy, search strategies, all sorts of things that we need to know in order to do a good job on our research. And so, Rachel, I'll let you take it away. I know you might want to talk a little bit more about what your actual job is than what I said, but I certainly have been on the receiving end of a lot of help from Rachel, and I'm just delighted she's agreed to do this today. Take it away, Rachel.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Rebecca. And before I forget, I'm going to make you the co-host so that if we have any weird interruptions, the Zoom meeting won't just close. So I am Rachel Olson. I am the first year communication and social sciences librarian at Uncg. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And you can email me at rachel.olson@uncg.edu, and you can make an appointment. All my appointments are virtual for at least the fall at go.uncg.edu/Rachel. So before I do anything else, I want to share the link to these slides, and I will share it in the chat as well. It's go.uncg.edu/GRO research. That will take you to these slides, which have a number of links and resources in them that you might be interested in. And also, I may add to them later if things come up in our conversation that we want to elaborate on a little bit more. So feel free to go back to these slides at any time. I also want to say that while I realize a lot of you are probably Uncg people, the Uncg libraries are publicly funded. We're a state-run organization. It is a public library, and you are entitled to my assistance. You are entitled to use a lot of our resources and to get help. So this presentation is for you as well. I will talk about resources that are specific to Uncg, but also some resources that are free and can be accessed by anyone. So don't worry if that's you. If you have questions as we go along, I believe if you click participants, you'll see the raise hand feature. You can also drop questions in the chat at any time. This is not meant to be super formal. I'm happy to answer any questions as we go along. So today we're going to talk about the basics of doing gerontology-oriented research using library resources. I'm going to specifically touch on some things like keyword formation, which can be, I think, a lot of people's barrier to doing the research they want to do is that they just don't know what to ask the database for. They don't know what to, how to phrase things. So some search strategies, a couple things that I would recommend for anyone who's interested in gerontological research. And again, like I said, there will be Uncg resources as well as resources that are free to the public. I'm also open to, if you have anything that you're like, hey, this is a really cool thing that I know about that you haven't mentioned, I'm always adding to the research guide that I'm going to show you, and I'm more than happy to take suggestions. So if there are no questions, I'll get going. We are recording. I'll make sure the recording is shared with you afterward. So I have a little activity. If you will go to slido.com, you don't have to do this, but I like to kind of do an icebreaker. And the event code is 43510. And answer this question. What are you most interested in learning about today? And when I put it up on the screen, you'll have that code. You also have it in the chat, slido.com. It'll ask you for a code 43510. And then if I can figure out how to, I always have trouble with this platform. Hang on just one second. Let's see. This is the user view. Hang on one second. If this doesn't work in a second, we'll just ask questions in the chat, and that's completely fine. Let me see if I can't log in for a second. I'm just curious about what it is that you're wanting to learn about research specifically today, to make sure that I address those questions. I don't know, is anyone on the Slido? Can you see, is it working on your end? I think you're muted, Rebecca.
It is working.
Yeah, it's working. Okay, great, cool. Well, then let me just figure out how to display it and we'll be good to go.
What is the code again?
It's in the chat. It's 43510. There you go. Great. Yes. So slido.com, code 43510. Great, great, great. So quick tips to make searching for journal articles easier for students. What are some new gerontology research resources? And then broad overview and tips. That's great. I'll wait another minute or two if anybody. Okay. Databases, absolutely. All right. Broad overview. Perfectly fine. All right. Well, I will search terms in Boolean logic. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Absolutely. Great. All right. So let's keep going, and I will try to remember to come back to that. So a basic overview of Uncg libraries for you. Two main branches. There's Jackson Library, which is sort of in the middle of UNCG's campus, and then Harold Schiffman Music Library, which is in the music building. They are open to the public. All of our resources are free for UNCG faculty, staff, and students. That includes databases, that includes pretty much anything you can think of. And there are workarounds if you are a non-UNCG patron, which I can talk about as well. So I wanted you to know about those. We have millions of resources, literal millions of resources. Print books, ebooks, journal articles, DVDs, streaming films, our wonderful special collections and university archives department, and our digital media commons. The ones that are starred are ones that are only really available to UNCG affiliated patrons. I will show you workarounds. We also have something called a community borrower's card, which again, I'll drop the link to the slides for you in the chat. You can click on that and it'll give you information about that. Basically, you can borrow materials if you are a community patron, no problem. You can come into our computers on campus, excuse me, and sometimes you use ebooks and journal articles. It really depends on the resource. So if you have any questions about accessing those things, I'm certainly happy to help with that. 1,200,000, that is the number of print books that are located in Jackson Library alone. And then 1.7 million is the number of ebooks available via the UNCG University libraries. We are actively collecting print books and ebooks. Our emphasis for this semester, because of COVID, is on ebooks, because I think we want to limit, physical interaction as much as possible. But the library is open, and you can go and borrow those print materials if that's something you're interested in. So getting into sort of the research aspect, forming effective keywords. So what I always tell students is, when you have a research topic, put it in the form of a question or a statement. What is it specifically that you want to know about this topic? So if you were given or interested in nursing homes and pet therapy, put it into an actual question that kind of defines what exactly it is you want to know. So my sample question is, how do nursing home residents respond to pet therapy in the United States? That's a great question. I'm going to then highlight what I consider to be the key words in this sentence. So for me, it's nursing home, pet therapy, and United States. Those are sort of the key words that will then become our search terms that we kind of want to hone in on a little bit, try and focus on those. When you're in databases, these are definitely going to be what we're going to want to use. And then what I do is I take each of those terms and I create synonyms for each of them. So nursing home, there's a couple different terms there: long-term care facility, residential care, care home, elder care. A lot of you probably would have other ideas about how to phrase this in a database than I would. These are just some examples. And then you'll notice with this one on the right, United States, it seems a little silly to break it down into all of those terms, but databases are only going to search. This is not Google, right? Google does something called natural language processing, which means if we go to Google and we look up USA, it will automatically pick up on all of these terms, right? Library databases do not use natural language searching for a variety of reasons, so you have to be specific about all the terms that you want it to search for. Now, don't be afraid, you won't have to enter each of those individual terms into a database every time you search. There are some nice features in databases that keep that from happening, so we'll talk about it. But pulling out the most important concepts in your research question and then creating synonyms for them is a great way to kind of get on the right track in terms of doing your research. Any questions? All right, so searching strategies, a few tips and tricks. So I'm going to explain how Boolean operators work. So there are 3 Boolean operators that you'll find in databases: and, or, and not. This is a quick sort of chart that I like about how to use them. So if you use and, the connector and, if like politics and media, I'm going to only get results that include both politics and media. Okay, so and is going to limit your results quite a bit. Or is going to do the opposite. It's going to open them up quite a bit. So if you did politics or media, you'll get all the ones that have just politics, all the ones that have just media, and all the ones that have both. So and limits you or opens up the possibilities. Not is one that I don't use very often, but it can definitely be helpful if you are interested in the Civil War, but not American. This is a really good example. If you did Civil War, not American, you would get anything that includes the term Civil War, but you would not get anything that mentions the word American in any way. So I hope that's helpful. It's one of those things that you kind of just have to dig into and start practicing with, and then you get kind of a better understanding of it. But this chart, I think, is helpful for some people. So this is an example of a database called Psycinfo that we have access to. And this is how it will sort of look when you get into the database. This is an example I use a lot with psychology students. So if I type in eating disorders, I'm going to get 41,000 results. Okay, that's obviously way too many. I want to narrow it down a little bit. So I'm going to use my Boolean operator. If I do eating disorders and self-esteem, it narrows it down to 2,000 results. And you'll notice I put these phrases into quotation marks. It's called phrase searching. Basically what it does is it makes sure that the database searches those terms together. That way it won't search the word eating separate from the word disorders, or the word self separately from the word esteem. And I'll say that most databases these days wouldn't do that anyway. You don't have to put things in quotation marks. I always like to do it just as sort of a backup. So 2,000 results is still a little too much for me. I want to narrow it down more. I'll add another keyword, and men, and that takes me to 176, which is a much more workable number than, you know, the thousands I started with. You could also get a little fancier with it, and you could put in some of those synonyms that I was talking about earlier, and that would open it back up just a little bit, and we go up to 340 results. And I'll actually show you, we'll do some live searching in some databases to give you more examples of how this works. But that's sort of the basics of Boolean searching. Any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. It actually goes back to the last part. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if there, when you were showing like synonyms, I know when there were print versions, there used to be kind of, you know, there would be dictionaries for each database. Is there now, do different databases have suggested terms? I'm thinking, you know, like older adults, senior citizens.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll look at how some of those work. It's actually pretty nice the way they have it set up. There will be some suggested terms, particularly in a couple of the ones we're going to look at. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So here are some recommended databases. I'm going to go to, this is called a LibGuide, the library guide for gerontology at Uncg. And I will show you what that looks like. So lots of information here. If we click on finding articles, this is a list of databases. Well, now we have like 700 databases available because through Uncg. I chose a couple of them that I think are particularly helpful for people doing gerontological research. There are a couple of journals up here. These honestly need to be updated because I'm sure there are many more in the field that are helpful, but the databases is what I want to focus on. So a quick explanation here. You have Academic Search Complete, which is one of my favorite databases. It is what we call a general database. It's very interdisciplinary. It's going to search across lots and lots of different disciplines. And that's really great if you are doing research that is in a field like gerontology, where we tend to have things that relate to nursing or psychology or social work, things like that. But if you know of specific topic databases like this one, subject databases like Ageline, this description is actually incorrect. Ageline focuses on aging and gerontology specifically. So it's going to search across a much narrower swath of resources. But if you are looking for something pretty specific or niche to the field, this is a good place to look. So I'm going to show you Ageline. Ageline is owned by a company called EBSCO. A lot of people, when they're doing research, will come to me for help, and I'll say, okay, well, where have you already looked? They'll say, I looked in EBSCO. And the problem with that is that EBSCO owns hundreds of databases. So be sure that you're noting the specific one that you're looking in, which for us is Ageline. So EBSCO is not a database. EBSCO is a company that owns databases, okay? I'm gonna try and zoom in a little bit here. So Ageline, if we go back to our pet therapy and nursing homes question, I'm gonna type nursing homes, and you'll notice immediately a couple suggestions that come up here. I'm going to click it, and it will automatically populate the box for me. So we have nursing homes or care homes or long-term care or residential or aged care facility. You can add your own if you want to. And then I'm going to put pet therapy. And when I type the word or, again, I get all these suggestions. And then United States and all those suggestions. So what I'm essentially telling the database to do is, okay, database, I want you to search for results that include any of the terms from the first box and any of the terms from the second box and any of the terms from the third box. So I'm going to click search. It's pulling across different journals that have been marked as relevant to this database or this field. I have 71 results. I did a pretty specific search, so I'm honestly not surprised that that's what I'm getting. So I'm going to use a couple of filters over here on the left side. I'm going to limit to academic journals. That does not necessarily mean peer-reviewed, by the way. Not all academic and scholarly journals, for our students here, not all academic or scholarly journals have been through the peer-reviewed process. Don't let that trip you up. Publication date, I can also narrow down if I want. And I'm left with 4 results. For a subject-specific database where we entered lots of specific terms and put on some filters, that's honestly just fine. That's not a bad number of results. If you find an article that you're interested in, you could click on the title. And you have a couple things here. You have the abstract, which is nice. An abstract, for those of you who aren't familiar with this sort of stuff, is basically a summary of what the article says. So an abstract can be nice. It will save you some time. If you're flipping through a lot of different resources, you just sort of quickly read this paragraph. It's usually less than 250 words. Subject terms, right here, these are basically suggested keywords that you might find helpful. So if you were to click on any of these, it would perform a search for it. If you are making your list of keywords that you want to try and search for, you might consider adding some of these. The author and the journal title are both here, as well as all the publication information. On the left, if you click PDF full text, or sometimes it says HTML full text, here is the article. And you could download it. This little download button right here would save it for you. Or if you go back, a couple other options here. You could print it. There's a print tool. Email, you can email it to yourself. There's also a permalink tool. Here's the thing about linking. So if you're someone, you just really wanted to send yourself a plain link to this article, that's doable. You don't want to just grab the one up here. This is not a stable URL. It will not work when you come back to it. You want to use the permalink. It has to do with our login privileges basically at Uncg. So this is the link that you would copy and paste for yourself. And then also on the right, you have a cite tool. This is popular among students. For instance, here's an APA style citation. I see several mistakes in this citation already. So what I always tell students is, if you're gonna take this and put it into a bibliography or a reference list, that's fine. It's a good starting point, but you always wanna make sure to check it against the citation resources that we have. So going back to our guide for gerontology for a second, gerontology typically uses APA. So if I click on APA citation style, there are some nice resources available here to you. We also have a larger Uncg site on citation. And we just recently made the switch as a campus to APA 7. And lots of examples here, sample citations that might be helpful. So feel free to use these algorithm-produced citations, but be careful and always check them against something more official. That's my spiel about that. So that's one database out of, again, 700-ish. There are lots of others that I could recommend to you. Psycinfo is basically a great resource if you're interested in anything that has to do with psychology. SOSIndex is very social sciences focused. Academic Search Complete is the main one that I tend to point people to because, again, it searches across lots of disciplines. So you'll notice here, I'll just do that search quickly that we did in Ageline. Nursing home therapy, United States. I got like 71 results in Ageline Plus. Here I'm getting 28, which is actually really odd. I must have changed something. But anyway, normally searching in Academic Search Complete would actually give you a much broader variety of search results. Again, I'm doing kind of a specific search here, so this may not be the best example, but you'll get things that aren't specific to gerontology and aging in the way that that other database was.
Can I ask a question
at
this point?
Sure.
Nowadays, a lot of time I find myself just going to Google Scholar as my first stop. What are the advantages and disadvantages of just going to Google Scholar?
Yeah, so Google Scholar is not my favorite database. I would say probably the major disadvantage of Google Scholar is that it does not have very many filters. You'll notice we have all these different options for narrowing our search results here on the left. Google Scholar does not provide that. Let me see if I can find it. Google Scholar is not a bad resource. I would not say that at all, but it just doesn't give you sort of the comprehensive look that these other databases do. It doesn't have nearly as many features. Again, right here, if I did pet therapy and nursing home, the search interface is a lot more plain. There's not really an advanced searching option. And this is all the filters that I'm gonna get from Google Scholar. I would also say that it does not search across, it's not nearly as authoritative in the results that it pulls. That's maybe not completely fair to say, but I just sometimes wonder about sort of the quality of some of these. It also really, yeah, Lori makes a point that there are a lot of older articles, which may or may not be beneficial. It's also just something that takes sort of the, and this is a good thing and a bad thing, it takes some of the sort of art out of the searching process, like Boolean operators aren't nearly as helpful to you when you're using Google and Google Scholar. So many disadvantages, some advantages. I personally can't live without these filters when I'm doing research. I need them. So that's my main answer for that one.
Thank you.
Sure. Google Scholar, however, is great when you're doing legal research. I have absolutely no problem admitting that. I'm not anti-Google at all in any way. Use it all the time. A couple other databases you may find helpful that are on that gerontology library guide. ProQuest Social Sciences is one we didn't talk about. It looks slightly different, but searches across things in a similar way. All these databases may search across some similar things, but everyone has its differences. So just because you've checked one doesn't mean that you won't find new things in another one. So I wouldn't limit yourself. I briefly want to talk about newspapers. We have this nice newspapers guide, and it has recently been redesigned. We have access to a lot of different newspapers, both at the local level, the national level, some at the international level. A lot of the resources on this guide are actually free to the public. So Newseum is a really great resource. Newspaper Map is one of my favorites. It literally will show you a listing of newspapers around the world. To back out here. Computer's not being very cooperative. So you could zoom in on a particular location and see listings for newspaper titles in that area. I'm trying to get in on North Carolina. There we go. Oh, come on. The mouse is just not cooperating today. Anyway, so you could potentially look at some Greensboro News and Record. You click it, it will take you to the homepage for that newspaper. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but I think sometimes geographic locations are definitely something that we want to look at with newspapers and doing research in that way. So if you're interested in what the main newspaper is in Saudi Arabia, you could mouse over it with this map and see. It also shows you just the sheer amount of newspapers that exist in the world. And of course, this is a constantly growing and changing resource. I have a video here that you can check out later if you're interested on how to, if you have access to UNCG's resources. We have two different New York Times databases, one that does 1980 to the present, or one that is from 1851, which is when the New York Times started publishing, all the way to 3 years in the past. There's a 3-year sort of what's called an embargo. It doesn't really matter because if you want recent stuff, just use the main New York Times database. But this video explains the benefits of using our databases to go through and find their articles versus using their website. They have a beautiful and wonderful website. I use some of the tools on it all the time, but very often you'll hit what's called a paywall, which is where it says, you know, you need to pay $10 or be a subscriber in order to access this. So this video is basically a workaround of how to do that. So newspapers are definitely worth your time. Any questions?
I just want to mention I haven't seen the workaround video, but I do this. I subscribe and get a little, you can get a kind of digest in your email, and you can click on different kinds of digest. And then when I get that digest, I just cut and paste and go into our free database at the university. Yeah. Is that basically what you recommend, or do I need to watch this video?
I mean, it's worth watching. I think that it's a little different. It's about 5 minutes long, and the process talks about, a lot of times what's really confusing about the New York Times to me is that sometimes the title of the article that's on the website, like the headline that's listed on the website, is not the same as how it's indexed in the database. So they'll have a clever, cute title for the website, but then when you're actually trying to locate the article within the database, they've archived it as something else. So you have to do a little digging sometimes. It doesn't happen all that often, but it can be something to remember.
That actually explains something. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I, some of the stuff we've done in your Canvas courses, that's the problem with a couple of them, as a matter of fact. It's not your fault. It's the New York Times. Yeah, absolutely. So here are some free resources that are available to everybody. So NC Live is a great resource. I don't know how many people here have heard of it, nclive.org. I'll drop it in the chat. It's basically a library service for anyone in the state of North Carolina who has a public library card. And public library cards are, for the most part, freely obtainable. So if you go to nclive.org, we'll explore it here for a second. There are some key databases that I would recommend for anyone who's working through NC Live. ProQuest Central, CinAll Plus, which is nursing, ProQuest Social Sciences, and the New York Times. There is New York Times access available to the public in North Carolina, and many, many more. So let's just take a second to look at NC Live. Again, it automatically logs me in through Uncg, but you can get access to it even if you are not a Uncg patron. Anyone with a library card can get into this. So what I like to do is click on articles. And they have a list of their databases here. And you will notice that a lot of their databases, they actually provide access for us to a lot of the stuff that we have that we recommend for our patrons. So this is a full list alphabetized of UNCG's databases. There are about 700. All of these are listed on there. We are an NC Live member, and so we have access to these. Some of the big ones that I recommend, like they're recommending right here, ProQuest Central. ProQuest Central is basically the same thing as Academic Search Complete in terms of subject coverage. It's going to search across a wide variety of different things. So it looks different, the interface is different, but the rules are essentially the same. So nursing home. One thing I don't love as much about ProQuest databases, and again, ProQuest is not the name of the database. ProQuest is the name of the company that owns the database. So you need to make note of, you're searching in ProQuest Central, not just ProQuest. Nursing home or long-term care. They'll give you some suggestions, not as many, but it works. Pet therapy or therapy animals. And I can add a row, United States. And you can select a lot of filters up front. I tend to just like to see what I get. So I click search. And I get, anytime now, 192,000 results. It's way too many for me to try to dig through. So again, I'm going to use the filters on the left. I tell students it's kind of like shopping on Amazon. If you need to narrow stuff down, look to the left. So scholarly journals, if that's what you want. You can find a lot of things in these databases that are not scholarly journals. And once again, for students who might be listening, scholarly does not necessarily mean peer-reviewed. So here you have a filter that says limit to peer-reviewed. And I certainly don't mean to imply that peer-reviewed is the only way to go. I just know that a lot of students have that specific requirement from professors that, you need to use specifically peer-reviewed things. Limit to full text will show you things that you can get instant access to. Many libraries, including UNCG's library, have interlibrary loan services. So if there was something that was just listed here, but no PDF access, you could certainly request it for free through Interlibrary Loan. Many public libraries also have interlibrary loan services. So don't be shy, I'm happy to help connect you with any of those. Lots of different filters you could use here. This is from Current Gerontology and Geriatrics Research, 2014. I click on the title. It's basically all the same features that are in Academic Search Complete. It just looks different. So you have the abstract. The PDF is here. You could download it, print it. Cite is here. I'm going to use APA. Be careful. So APA is on its 7th edition. So here's one. I see some mistakes in that citation. So I would take this, put it into my bibliography, and then check it using some of those resources I showed before. One thing that I really like about ProQuest is this references feature. A lot of the references they have made into like a hyperlinked list. Like right here, it's telling me all of the references. And in many cases, it will point me directly to the text. I can pull up the article. So that's really nice. Under abstract and details, you have all those nice things, including those suggested keywords. You also have the document URL. If you are someone who wants to send a link to yourself, this is the permalink, essentially. That's where you'll find it. more NC Live things. They are sorted by subjects, very sort of general subjects. For our purposes, I would probably say either health and wellness or social sciences, depending on sort of the strain of gerontology research you're interested in. So I click social sciences. Lots of really great things here that you may find helpful. They have super generic names. Don't worry about it. They're perfectly, you know, great to use, no problem. I could go on for hours about the different databases here. Many of them I use on a regular basis. There are also things you might be interested in. This isn't really gerontology specific. There are homework help resources here. So if you have children, I know a lot of us are doing the virtual schooling thing. There are things here for pretty much anybody in North Carolina who's interested. Test prep resources, career development, language learning. It really is a fantastic resource. There are streaming video resources. Uncg has lots of streaming media options. A lot of them are, you know, crossover with some of these listings. So I highly encourage you to use it. They have an advanced search tool. So you could set up your advanced search here and search across lots of NC Live resources rather than just one or two. It's truly up to you. So that's a very quick overview of NC Live, and they have a very active social media presence. So I would encourage you, they're all the time doing these online learning trainings that you can sign up for completely free. They have a nice contact us feature, but you can see descriptions of things that are coming up, and you can register, stuff like that. They're doing one on one of their resources called Credo Reference, which is really awesome. A lot of these trainings are for librarians, but you may still find them helpful. They also do a lot of open education stuff, and we'll talk about open educational resources here in a second. But I wanted to see if anybody has any questions about NC Live. Okay. So, open educational resources are basically things that are available online, and they're different from open access. So open educational resources, this is something that we tend to try and point instructors to a lot. Open education resources are things that you can do more with than just read them. You can remix them, reuse them. There are the 5 R's of OER. Retain, reuse, revise, remix, redistribute. That's some characteristics of a resource that is truly open. And I'll drop the link here for you if you're interested in this guide. We have pages on OERs for educators, learners. There's this OER by subject feature. And I believe, yeah, gerontology is listed with social work. And we have some things here. I'm always happy to add more. You'll notice it is very much a work in progress. So if there are things that you come across, there are definitely resources I know of that I just haven't had a chance to plug in here. But we have lots of these resources. You may want to consider alternatives to textbooks for your students, save them some cash. OER mini grants is a really great program that we have. Faculty instructors at Uncg can get small grants if you agree to work with the library to at least reduce the cost of textbooks for one of your courses in sort of a concentrated way. So if you're interested in this program, I will drop the link here. I'm not sure with COVID exactly what the cycle is going to look like this year, but we can at least provide you with information if nothing else. So you can also see past winners under grant winners. You can see past cycle winners who, you know, some of them may be your colleagues, and you may be interested in asking them what their experience was like and if they have any, you know, recommendations, things like that. So always happy to help answer questions about that. There are these resources listed here: OpenStax, open.umn, lots of things that you may want to dig through for your own sort of research. Plenty of open resources out there on the internet. So I highly encourage the use of those. So teaching your students about research, if you are an instructor and you're looking to kind of get your students acquainted with some of this stuff, you can show them the recording of this presentation. That's totally fine. But you may want to use a couple of other things. So we've recently, in the last year, created a lot of different tutorials. And this is sort of the website view. Excuse me, they're also all available in the Canvas Commons, which is the approach that I would recommend taking. But basically, they're based on our 5 learning outcomes that we have for information literacy: find, evaluate, use, credit, and create. And we have some explanations up above of kind of what that means. These are basically information literacy tutorials. And I would highly encourage you to take some of them yourself. We just created one about OER, finding OER materials for UNCG instructors. It's very much sort of catered toward folks who teach. There are things on like citation management with Zotero, which we haven't even touched on here today. A lot of these things are designed for students. I always think it's kind of a nice refresher for myself. When I'm building some of these tutorials with my colleagues, I learn things that I didn't know about. So highly recommend those. Again, they're all available in the Canvas Commons. If you want to assign them to your students and have them provide some sort of proof of completion, I would highly recommend going via the Canvas Commons and just downloading it into your course, which I'm happy to help you with. You can schedule a library instruction session. A lot of those, at least if you schedule it with me, will be formatted in a very similar way to this. I will ask for your syllabus, and if there are specific assignments that students are working on, I can definitely cater something toward that. LibGuides, which we've looked at, and then consultations. This is available for anyone. This is not just students. This is faculty, staff, students, public patrons. You can schedule a time to meet with me virtually, and it will ask you to fill out a little bit of information, and we can talk. And much more is available to you. Here I've linked to a couple of resources. These are videos that I've created on how to use some of these resources. And my YouTube page is sort of chock full of this stuff. I'm always adding things to it. So I encourage you to check that out. That's all I have for you formally. There is one more thing I want to point out, and then we'll take questions and maybe do some searching based on what people are interested in. The chat service, which here's a link, go.uncg.edu/chat, and say, hi, this is Rachel showing some folks how to use chat. This is a live service that's available all over our website. You'll see the chat boxes. This is open most hours that the library is open, and they say hi. Sorry, that was a loud beep, but they're very helpful, and I often will staff chat. These are real librarians, library interns that you're talking to at UNCG who know the resources and can certainly answer quick questions that you may have. Also, I want to point out, I realize that not everyone here who's a UNCG affiliate falls under one of my subjects in terms of the departments I work with. So if you are sociology, social work and gerontology, anthropology, archaeology, political science, peace and conflict studies, or psychology, I'm your librarian. If you are in another department, if you drop that in the chat, I will happily tell you who your librarian is. So I just wanted to point that out, that my colleagues are absolutely a resource that's available for you. I depend very heavily on them. So that's all the formal content I have for you. Is there anyone who has a question? And once again, I'll drop the link to the slides in the chat for you. Please feel free to access this later at any time you like.
I will ask some questions unless somebody else has one they want to ask. Okay. There are a couple of people online in this group that I know are doing research on specific topics because I'm working with them. So I wanted to expand, kind of talk about some things that are a little bit more specific and a little more general. First, and Zach, feel free to jump in here. Zach Brackett is from UNC Asheville, but he and I are working on some research that is not exactly gerontological, but I knew this would be useful for him. And I noticed Suda was online earlier. I don't know if she's still here, but she's in the Human Development Program. And I have a question about how you would recommend looking for material on kind of generations, on things like transmission of values from one generation to the other, socializing one generation, parents socializing their children, and more of a human development approach than just looking at an age category. Are there particular tips for looking at for intergenerational theories and things like that?
Well, so I think that what that comes down to is really keywords and coming up with the proper search terms. Like I'm not very familiar with that particular field of study. So I would say that looking at a few resources that, like if there are articles that are just seminal to that topic, maybe pulling from some of those and reusing some of the terms they use. I'll also say there's a guide on human development and family studies. My department head, Amy Harris-Hauk, is the librarian for that subject, and she may be more sort of up to date on that literature than I am. Let's see. So she's recommending Psycinfo, a lot of the ones that I am. Academic Search Complete is always a great place to start for something that interdisciplinary. I really think it's a matter of forming those sort of specialized keywords and seeing what you get. And then also one thing that I recommend for people is if there is literature that you know exists already and you have access to, look through the bibliographies of those sorts of things. These are very, I mean, you all probably know a lot of this already, but I always recommend that people sort of mine the references of things that they know are helpful to see what else is coming up. I don't know how specifically helpful that is, but there may be things that could come out of that. A lot of times, encyclopedias and dictionaries are great because they can provide you with some of those sort of that background information and give you an idea for what the terminology in the literature for that field is going to look like. So that's what comes to mind first.
Just as a follow-up question, because looking at bibliographies is something I always recommend to my students for tracking down relevant information. One thing I used to do that I stopped doing when I stopped using printed resources is I used to look, they had this reverse directory that used to be in the research office at the library where you could see who had cited an article. Mm-hmm. So if you found a specific article, you could reverse cite it. And how did you do that online?
So actually, that is one thing that I will give Google Scholar a lot of credit for. Google Scholar's citation metrics and indexing is a good place to start for that. So, and I would recommend if you're going to use Google Scholar and you're a Uncg person, go through our databases list to get to it, because that way you will avoid, it will open up some features for you, and you'll also avoid some of the paywall stuff. So, let me just pull a basic. So this is an article from 1997, Successful Aging. You can see the citation right there, cited by 8,169, and it pulls up all the times that it's been cited. It is certainly not comprehensive. You will not find everything indexed in this way, but that is one of the nicer features of Google Scholar is the citation indexing that's relatively easy to use. There's also a database that we have called Scopus, which some of you are probably familiar with, especially people who are more sort of in the hard sciences. Scopus can offer information about, what I like the most about it is it's specific scholars. It has some like their H index numbers. It will also give you like lists of their publications. So if I click on authors, and let's try Adams, Rebecca, no pressure. Search. You can also enter someone's ORCID ID if you're familiar with an ORCID ID. And if I click on the name of the person I'm looking for. It's going to give me some subject areas. You have an author ID in Scopus, citation trends. It will also pull some documents. Again, it's not comprehensive. And then cited by. So if you're looking for a specific author, this is kind of a helpful feature for seeing where they've been cited.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So yeah, that one was called Scopus. I'll put the name in the chat.
I knew about Google Scholar, but I could tell it wasn't doing a comprehensive job. So that just knowing about Scopus is really helpful.
Yeah, and I can't say that Scopus is comprehensive either. There are some indexing things that are honestly pretty sophisticated that even I don't have a full understanding of, but I am happy if there are questions about citation indexing or scholarly profiles, things like that. I can definitely connect you with some folks in the library, my colleagues who are a little better versed in that than I am. Other questions?
Hi, Rachel. I can't find the clap thing, but I do have a question.
Yeah, the what thing?
Like the clap. I was trying to like cite.
Oh, no worries, no worries. You're fine. Yeah.
Or the raise hand, whatever.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Couple questions. The first one I had was, I know you mentioned interlibrary loan earlier. I wonder if you have an idea of the general turnaround time. For instance, a student has something due on a Sunday, but they're reaching out to me. Should I recommend interlibrary loan on a Friday versus, a couple weeks time?
Good question. Yeah. So there is no real time frame with interlibrary loan, and we kind of do that intentionally because it truly depends on which organization we're borrowing the materials from. It's so yes, if someone's writing to you on Friday for something that's due Sunday, interlibrary loan is not a good option because those folks only work Monday through Friday. I will say, sorry, I lost my train of thought here. In general, and this is not a rule, don't tell my colleagues I said this, a week for print books under normal circumstances, 2 to 3 days for articles. However, in the sort of COVID world, that's all up in the air because a lot of libraries that we're borrowing from have limited hours, just like we do. So in the normal world, I would say maybe a week for a print book, and it's delivered to Jackson Library, or a couple days for an article.
Awesome, thank you. And the other quick question I had was, I admittedly have not looked into all of the resources you have at Uncg in terms of library as a new faculty person. Yeah. I'm coming from an institution who had, you mentioned streaming services, who had a subscription to Canopy. I'm wondering if you have a similar subscription service for videos, in particular films.
Yeah, so we have a subscription to Canopy. We have what's called mediated access because the billing model for Canopy is absolutely wild. But I can send you, hang on one second, let me see if I can find it. This is the library guide on streaming media that we have. Basically the way it works, you can get whatever you want through Canopy. You'll go to it, there's this tab on using Canopy, and it has some instructions. Basically, we require that instructors request it, and then it's no problem for us to license it. It was just something people were sort of starting to use it kind of like Netflix, and it was just getting to be really expensive. But all faculty requests, instructor requests are going to be approved. So it's not a problem. And if you have a student who really needs something for their research, we can certainly figure out a way to get those approved as well. Like it's not that it's unavailable, it's just that it's mediated a little bit. So
awesome, thank you.
Absolutely.
A question I have, just real quick, slides that you brought up, you recommended formulating topics, et cetera, into questions. And one resource that I recently have just learned about because I am in my early days of working in research and researching, a resource that I just used for the first time from my library in Asheville is just talking to librarians about and allowing them to point me in the right directions of where to get started. Would you recommend doing that as well for like communicating with librarians? Like instead of trying to have like a grandiose list of like topics that you're kind of looking for, do you think it's easier for a librarian just when you formulate them into questions specifically?
Yeah, I think so. A librarian can definitely help you. So we're not always, some people have advanced degrees in their subject areas, and could probably talk the talk in terms of jargon and like field specific things. But search strategies are an art form, and I would definitely encourage you to talk to your librarians, even if they're not necessarily subject experts in your field. They are really good at doing research in that particular field. So you may have to provide some background information about what a specific term or concept is, but then we're typically pretty good at helping to connect with other concepts. And, you know, very often students will be telling me about something they're looking for, and I'll say, oh, well, you know, this field, I know about this really good resource for that. So you do not have to come with a ready-made research question or a research plan. That's definitely something that we can help you formulate. I would just say, you know, if there may be topic questions, but very often, especially my colleagues who have been at this a lot longer than I have, they also know the jargon in a lot of cases. So yeah, don't be shy. Absolutely. And if, you know, I personally, my policy is that if I can't figure it out, I will help you find someone who can. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I have a quick question. This is Linda. I did not get on the call right away. Probably missed maybe the first 25 minutes of it or so.
Okay.
How do I get the rest of it? Will you make this
Yes.
presentation available? Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I think Rebecca has an RSVP list, so we can send out the recording. I'm going to put it on my YouTube channel, and I'll caption it at some point.
Okay.
So it will be available probably as soon as this afternoon.
Cool.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I do think that there's, we do have an RSVP list. I have no idea how it matches up with who actually showed up.
Okay, yeah.
But I discovered that Zoom records the participant emails.
Oh,
so
great.
I think that there's a way to access it. We can figure it out. I did have, I wanted to find out, Trish Wammer is on the call, and I know she's been doing some research. I think we talked to you about this, Rachel, on baby boomers specifically, to develop a focused library guide for the gerontology program. I wondered, Trish, if you had any questions. Maybe she's not right there at the computer.
No, I am. I'm here. Sorry, I have to work and do this.
I get it. I just wondered if you had any questions. I mean, maybe good search terms, like if we could see an example of baby boomer as the term.
Yeah.
To see what the synonyms that come up automatically might be.
Absolutely. So let me take a look. And again, you can just go through library.uncg.edu if you want. I'm just showing this guide because it's curated a little bit. So I'm going to use Academic Search Complete for that one, because baby boomers is gerontological, sociological, psychology, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Baby boomers, or that's what comes up. Baby boomer generation or elders. You can also add more to that. But those are the general ones. And let's see, 81,000.
1,000. Good luck, Trish.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and you may find a lot of these subject terms and author supplied keywords might be helpful a lot of times, depending. This is an article about Korean Americans. There are articles, I mean, that's one of the nice things. You could narrow things geographically, you could narrow things by ethnicity, you could narrow things. One thing I will say about library databases, database companies in general, they're getting better at recognizing non-binary issues. But a lot of times, even in Psycinfo, which is our main database, under gender, they'll have male and female as the criteria that you can select, and right, like we know much more now about the difference between sex and gender and, you know, all that. They're getting better about it, but some of that you kind of need to reconcile through your search results. So if I were interested in trans folks, instead of trying to use a filter for that, I might use a keyword for that instead. So that's one thing to be aware of. So anyway, that's what I'll say about that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's awesome.
And I'm certainly available, even if questions aren't coming to mind right now. This is my information. You have the link to these slides and the YouTube recording I'll get posted. So I'm more than happy to talk at any point if that's what you need.
I guess one more quick question.
Sure.
Okay, this very, very quickly, another first timer question. The Boolean phrases, can that be used over, is that genuinely used like throughout like multiple databases, like not just from like one company?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Boolean operators, Boolean logic is something that is pretty widely used across fields, and pretty much I've never seen a database that wouldn't allow you to search based on Boolean logic. I believe even Google, not just Google Scholar, but like regular Google will allow you to use Boolean operators. So yeah, it's definitely something that works across, it's an informatics standard. So yeah, absolutely.
Right. Sometimes you have to use parentheses or quotation marks.
That's right. Yeah.
Algebra.
Yeah, it depends on the database. What I usually do is try to look for an advanced search button, and then usually it will have those boxes. It'll allow you to line it up nicely. But if you ever run into something that doesn't let you do that, I can definitely help out with those sort of formulaic things.
I just wanted to make sure that you were okay with the people who attended the sharing the slides more widely.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to have my baby, I invited my baby boomer class, but it's an asynchronous class. And so I'm going to make the slides available to the people who couldn't attend that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to share far and wide, as well as the YouTube video. I do have a Creative Commons license on here. Basically, it's share alike. So all I ask is that if people reuse any of the materials or remix any of this, that they share it for free with other people in the same way that I have.
So we can put it on the Gerontology Facebook page?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And the YouTube recording.
I'll let you do that. So
yeah, I'll take care of that. No problem.
Yeah.
And I will, once I get the recording, I'll add a slide that has the video recording in it as well. I'll go ahead and make a placeholder for that so you can access both. And I'll make sure the slides are linked on YouTube. So I try to make sure everything is linked everywhere.
Well, thank you. If there are there any more questions? I would just suggest that you all unmute yourselves for just a moment and let us all unmute. Let me see, how do we do that? Okay, are we all unmuted? Let's give Rachel a round of applause.
No worries, sure. Thank you. No problem.
Feedback going here.
Glad to help. I'm going to stop the recording, but